Welcome to Slator Pod's half-year anniversary podcast. Hello from Zurich.
Hi, it's Esther in London.
So yeah, we just noticed that this is episode 26. So we're at the half-year turning mark, and 3 of those month out of the 6 we've actually spent in lockdown.
That is right.
Although we're out of it now. Well, we're going to spare you the whole COVID update. I think the situation's similar. The UK may be a few weeks behind where I'm here, but gradually opening up. And that's fantastic to see. We've also, for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, we've actually made some improvements to the look and feel of the video because the heads were too big and we're too close to the camera, and so yeah, we're using a different video editing tool that we're going to use the first time this time. So be patient. It's going to incrementally increase. I think we started out with like an MVP, and now we're slowly getting up to a slightly more YouTube friendly format here. But most
2.0.
Yeah, 2.0. Most of you listen to this on the podcast, I think. So yeah, anyway, first, SlatorCon remote, we're still 3 weeks out. Probably hundreds of people are going to join. Feeling very excited about it. Registrations are coming in quite quickly, and the program's finished now. So fantastic. The final edition is David Edwards from Pipedrive. So he's the localization lead at Pipedrive. So it's a software like SaaS localization, which I think is a really nice addition to the program. It really kind of rounds it out. So we got everything: private equity, media localization, even the linguist perspective with the Chartered Institute of Linguists CEO. And now we got enterprise.
We got gaming as well.
Yeah, we got gaming, and now we got enterprise SaaS localization. So that's pretty much, well, covering a lot of the industry. Let me put it this way. Today on the agenda, first, we're going to talk about a very large survey the European Union published results of this week. We've been in touch with them for a while. We kind of had a heads up that this was coming, and so it's 2,800 companies they surveyed on like different use cases of machine translation and generally their attitude. And Esther, you're going to walk us through that, and then that kind of segues into a brief update Google Translate put out. And we're going to talk about that. And then there's M&A starting surprisingly quickly after the lockdown. So yeah, I guess for some it's good. Those selling, it's good, and those buying, hopefully it's going to be good in 3 years from now. So M&A is starting, and then also with this, the M&A and the kind of the financial world restarting, or it's also it's becoming a bit of a diverging fortunes situation with some of the small businesses, small LSPs, and the linguists. So we're going to close on that. All right, Esther. Well, so 2,800 responses or SMEs were surveyed in Europe around MT.
Yes.
What were some of the key findings there?
Yeah, so it was 2,868, so almost 2,900 people. And yeah, like you said, around sort of their machine translation use. So this is across small and medium enterprises, across a variety of sectors and across a lot of obviously different countries in Europe, talking about translation needs and their sentiment. So overall, apparently 40% of people in the survey had not used machine translation prior to taking part. And so on a sector basis, so we had people from like manufacturing was a little over a quarter of people, other quite strong representation across the professional, scientific and technical fields and services generally, as well as wholesale and retail and ICT.
So let me just jump in there. So you said 40% had not used, but then the percentages you've given now is around those that actually participated. So 28%.
That's the people who participated. Okay. Yeah, just to give an idea of the sort of makeup of the survey participants. And I mean, yeah, so really interesting kind of data points as well, and some charts included there. But so in terms of the countries, there wasn't a huge amount of difference, I have to say, across like countries that used MT more than others. So it was quite an even split consistently across. It was slightly higher in the UK, Bulgaria and Poland, where more than 50% of people in those countries said that their company does use machine translation. And then in terms of where people think machine translation is good, or where they would prefer to use machine translation, it's quite specific to certain sectors. So they've said, or certain uses, I suppose. Social media, 80% of people said they would use machine translation for social media. 70% said they would use it for kind of gathering information. 60% of people said they would use it in the case of chatbots. So those are the sort of strong use cases for machine translation. And then on the other side, you've got people still saying that they would prefer to use human translators for a variety of uses. So things like negotiating and signing contracts, resolving conflicts about commercial transactions, dealing with public sector abroad, and things obviously like marketing and promotional activities as well. That kind of strongly came out as being more suitable for human translation.
Actually, there was a comment on LinkedIn by no other than Lionbridge's chief marketing officer around that we shouldn't have this dichotomy between machine translation and human translation. I'll get to respond. I haven't had a chance to do that yet today, but I think it's not really. I mean, the survey was framed relatively rudimentary it said basically where to use machine. I mean, there wasn't and human. There was no like, okay, there's a human in the loop model. I think when they speak about human translation, they would, I would assume in this survey, just mean a human is part of producing the translation, right? Whether
I mean that hasn't been specified.
Been specified, right? So I think when these people say, well, for negotiating contract, resolving conflict, I prefer to have a human translation. I guess what they eventually mean is I would like to have a human involved in doing that translation, whether or not the machine did the prior translation or the initial translation. Probably it wouldn't really matter to them as an end buyer. And I wonder, I would love to talk to the 17% or so that said they would actually prefer machine translation when doing negotiation or signing contracts. That's that would be interesting. And really, you would prefer. So you're signing a contract based on what a machine has given you. Like that's interesting. So.
No, but that's a good point that you're making there. So I think machine translation here really should be understood as machine translation only, or raw MT, and everything else would be
that's right.
Eyes with the human eyes on it.
That's right. I think for the responses on specifically machine translation, it is pure MT, but the human side, I guess nobody really. Right. Many of these SMEs wouldn't. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say buyers, I think we're making the same point here. I was just going to say it's not something that buyers maybe would even think about or need to think about necessarily.
That's right. They just want to have a human involved in one way or the other. So I think it's not just like purely a human without any aids. Then there's top factors for considering using MT, right? I mean, what people really want to, you looked at that.
Well, so they're saying like what factors or what do you need from your machine translation, I suppose, or what do you look for in translation? Accuracy, ease of use. So accuracy came out on top, followed by ease of use, free of charge, and then speed.
Free of charge. Okay.
Free of charge. But I mean, interesting, free of charge was not top of the list.
Free, fast, and good.
Free, And then the least important for people was support. So although, I mean, that's the sort of thing which you don't realize that you need it until you need it. So who knows? Yeah.
So what else do we have? We have top languages were English, German, and French. Then how many docs per month with free, secure, automated translation? What was that?
So that's how many documents would you translate if you had access to a free, secure, and automated translation service? So most people, I mean, I guess the biggest number said somewhere between 3 and 10 documents a month they would use. And second biggest was somewhere between 11 and 50. So about a third of people said 11 and 50, 37% said between 3 and 10 documents a month. And I think they also then did a pilot to confirm, which confirmed that people on average were using the service for about five documents a month. So not huge, but I mean, it's still depending on could be of important use to the business, I suppose.
Yeah, but it also shows that those were not the most heavy users of localization translation, right? If you translate
course,
5 to 10 documents a month, I mean, you have an occasional need, but it's not something, they probably don't have like an internal localization manager, is what I'm saying, right?
Sure.
It's not
absolutely. This is kind of ad hoc, or
it's ad hoc,
I suppose.
SMEs. Oh, all right, I have some client in some country, I need a translation done, or I need to understand something when I get an email from somebody or something like that.
Yeah.
So this whole thing was conducted because they're, well, not launching, but they're pushing their eTranslation solution. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, exactly, eTranslation. So this is a service that it's a machine translation service online, brought out by the Commission in, I think, 2017 initially, and it looks like they're sort of expanding the program relating to that. So the service was originally created for government use, also for academics, universities, and for SMEs. So I think it kind of fits into maybe a bit more of an ideological goal, because they're talking about, wanting to put all businesses on an equal footing, irrespective of the working languages of the companies.
Okay, so my question there would be, why does a public entity have to create this? I mean, it's kind of nice to have, but there's plenty of private sector solutions for this, right? And I mean, if you look at DeepL's traffic numbers, obviously the private sector solutions are doing really well. I mean, we spoke about it many times before. Well, free for 5 to 10 documents a month, and it's definitely free.
I
right?
suppose.
Now the question is it secure? Are you really, are you comfortable sending your data over to DeepL? So probably free, 100% secure, etc. is maybe a hard is a bit of a difficult proposition for a private sector company. But that said, though, I mean, you're giving your documents to a public institution. So are you comfortable with that, right? I mean,
well, exactly.
There's people that would argue against that as well. So it's an interesting project, and it's also I wonder how much traction it's going to get competing with private sector solutions. Right. So it's
I mean, I think it was absolutely fascinating just in terms of sort of the scope of the survey. And I mean, definitely need to look into it a bit more and kind of break down some of the analysis there, per country and potentially per sector as well, to see if there's anything that can be sort of gleaned.
Yeah, we'll look into this with pivot tables.
Yeah.
So
yes.
Moving on from a public sector MT to a very much private sector MT that, whatever they do with your data, Google Translate. So I'm not going to go into detail here because that's an endlessly deep rabbit hole I fell into many times over the past 5 years. But Google Translate published a blog post around their recent advances and kind of, it was a nice summary of, where things came, how far things have come, but where things are still, there's room for improvement. So basically they said, hey, an update on the system. So they said that they had these RNNs, recurring neural networks. That was the initial architecture. They moved on to the transformer network. I think this seems like a not so relevant detail, but I think for actually the language industry at large, this is something to remember. Like there was a kind of a transformational shift from one framework to another one, and Google Translate did that. Now, that said, though, they said that they now use a hybrid model where the so-called encoder is on the transformer and the RNN, the decoder is on the RNN. Now, I got to say, I have no idea what encoder and decoder means from a technical point of view, but that's what they're using now. They also said that one of the advances was that they improved the web crawl. So, that Google Translate's basically feeding off all of the bilingual content on the internet. And that they denoised that training data. That was another advance they made. And I find it interesting that from a Google perspective, really the first thing that comes to mind when they think about parallel data is the internet, right? As opposed to many of these more managed service or niche machine translation provider who probably don't go out there and crawl the internet, but actually have highly curated parallel data repositories. But of course, for Google to offer solutions in or MT in like 150 languages or 110 languages, it would just be an impossible task to have like humans curate and polish all that data. Now, they pointed out that in low resources languages, there's also some that they're working on this. There's these back translation mechanisms that we spoke about in the past. I'm not going to go into it here. The massive multilingual approach, and then this apparently allows for like massive for transfer learning on a massive scale. So, for example, they mentioned you can train a Yiddish model on a German data, and that so there's some transfer learning involved there. On the translation quality aspect, they didn't mention anything new. They're still using that blow metric that we mentioned many times before. That is a very flawed metric if you actually look very closely. To wrap up, I think what's very interesting is that they continue to use these kind of caveats. So they say, although impressive strides forward for machine translation have been made, one must remember that especially for low resource languages, automatic translation quality is far from perfect. Or they say state-of-the-art systems lag significantly behind human performance in all but the most specific translation tasks, right?
Yeah.
Very interesting that 4 years after all of the human level quality breakthrough, groundbreaking advances, we're launching this now. Basically, we're literally at the exact same caveats that we were at 10 years ago, right? So now has MT improved?
So it's definitely better, but not, it's in a very sort of niche context.
It's absolutely, it's massively better, but the way they're phrasing it is still exactly the same. So they're kind of coming back down to earth a little bit.
Do you know, one point I was going to say, and I think I mentioned this to you already, was they were saying that with all of the tweaks and things that they've made as outlined in the blog post recently, they managed to achieve sort of 5+ like additional 5 blue score points, which was the same as the shift from when they moved from phrase-based to neural machine translation. So I thought, that, we think as neural machine translation obviously is transformational, but then obviously all of this other work is going into the background to keep on, which can also sort of incrementally improve quality.
It can. Now, I just have an issue with that metric.
Yeah.
I have an actual.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I just have a personal. I don't think that metric makes sense anymore. I think if you really look deep, and I honestly don't have the capacity right now to look deep into blue. We've done it before, and it's all on Slator, and go and check it out. But it's a flawed metric, especially as quality becomes good. That metric just doesn't make much sense anymore. I mean, we've run a piece called the end of blue or some headline like that.
Something.
I think those machine learning people need to understand you cannot mathematically measure the quality of a text. I mean, that's coming. I'm not a math guy. I'm a linguist. It's just not possible. You're not going to be able to mathematically evaluate the quality of a text. To the nth degree. Yes, you can probably ascertain, is it gibberish or is it a well-written text? But like once you get to the well-written text, then the math kind of falls out the window, in my view. And that's that. Taking a stand here from the linguist point of view.
Drawing a line in the sand.
Draw a line in the sand. So. Moving away from MT. Sorry, we spent 20 minutes talking about MT, but let's move to another favorite topic of ours, mergers and acquisitions. So there was a bit of a quiet time during the lockdown. One of the reasons was, probably capital was held relatively tight for the first, few weeks of the lockdown because nobody knew what was going to happen. But with the stock market actually roaring back, probably some of that capital has been set free again. Also, I mean, it's kind of hard to do an acquisition over Zoom. You're not going to do a managed. It's hard to meet the management and ownership of a company you're going to buy over a Zoom or whatever else video tool you're using call. So now it looks like people are starting to meet again. It's possible. I mean, in Europe you can fly around again. So the first one was IYUNO, the big media localization company. What did they buy, Esther?
Well, they bought a dubbing and post-production studio based in Germany called Scalamedia. So this was an article that we published this morning on that acquisition. No sort of big details there, or no specifics, I should say. But I mean, it's sort of ramping up their presence in Germany quite a bit. They did already have an office in Germany through the BTI acquisition, but this now I think takes up their headcount in Germany to around 90 people. And dubbing, obviously, very strategic, very popular in Germany. So yeah, kind of a logical step there within dubbing.
Yeah, dubbing. I mean, I'm a big consumer of German dub content with the kids. Daily, all of those Paw Patrol and trucks and that. I think maybe I wonder if dubbing is somewhat easier for cartoons because the lip movements are obviously much more rudimentary.
Yeah. So it's not sort of it's not synchronized.
Yeah, probably don't have to sync
so
that much. Now we just started watching this robo fight thing yesterday, and I mean, it's like it's literally just a mouth that goes. I mean, it's a robot, right? So there's probably little lip syncing going on. But I mean, Germany is probably one of the top markets for dubbing, I'd assume. And interesting acquisition there by IYUNO. Then there's also a company in Australia called AI Media, which we didn't really have on our radar prior to about 4 months ago when they got some funding and acquired another company in the US. I think they're more in initially what they call like access services, like the captioning and subtitling. And AI Media obviously has the AI in it. And so they're really gunning for that AI label in the language services space. Again, they do captioning, translation, transcription, subtitling. And they're reported to be considering a listing in Australia, i.e. listing on the stock exchange, doing an IPO, and that AFR, the Australian Financial Review, I think it's called, they set the valuation, the deal could value, or the IPO could value the company to triple-digit million. I think it is 200 or 300 million or something. So that would be a pretty big IPO for this industry. That said, though, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go IPO. We had this story about a year ago where Lionbridge was rumored to be exploring a listing in Australia, and obviously that didn't happen. So
sometimes it doesn't pan out, or something. Yeah,
it doesn't pan out.
People change their mind, right?
They changed their mind. That said, AI Media is an Australian company, so it would be a logical step. Whereas Lionbridge is, emphatically not an Australian company. Again, the whole angle here would be, hey, this may be the next Appen, it's going bonkers on the stock exchange. You're like up to like $3.5 billion, $4 billion market cap. Straker also played to this when they listed, and now, who knows, maybe AI Media is going to list. That would be such a random thing that you have like all of these. Basically, the language industry IPOs happen in Australia.
They're just all centralized in
why in Australia? Like,
Well, I think you said as well about South Korea also being a little bit of a hub or something. Isn't there a couple there?
Well, you just had Flito, so that was this. Okay. But basically, the last major capital markets transaction in Europe or the US was Lionbridge's delisting. Right when they left the Nasdaq. Since then, as far as I know, not much happened. Right, so
we've got quite a few in the UK already. So I don't know.
Yeah, which would argue that why not take a few more public?
Take a few more, yeah.
I mean, like, okay, why Australia? It seems like the Australian public has some appetite, or the investors. Like they have these huge, they call it super. There's this superannuation, like the pension plan. So there's a lot of capital going into from all these what they call supers in Australia. So it seems like those institutional investors that manage all these people's savings have an appetite for these types of listings. So let's see how that pans out. I think typically when you're in this stage, like when you're starting the roadshow with investors, you should, the listing would be then an official announcement should be away a couple of months. It shouldn't take too long. So while while all of this, while you have companies again starting to buy other companies and people exploring listings, it's interesting that you're seeing like a diverging situation, diverging fortunes in this industry. While at the same time, we're about to publish an article where the European Union interpreters, the auxiliary interpreters, they were demonstrating in front of the European Parliament a couple of days ago, and we have we have exclusive footage and
wow! I was going to say, do we have images and
yeah,
things?
we just uploaded the video on YouTube where they
awesome.
where they're demonstrating. So on the one hand, you have people being let go, many people being let go, many translators, interpreters, and small boutique LSPs that happen to be in the wrong vertical, maybe in travel or have retail, some other verticals where they just happen to be for no fault of their. I mean, obviously that was their core niche that are really struggling. And I mean, the European Union is even an official, like a quasi-state body that basically lets people go or doesn't, I mean, has issues paying their contractors or doesn't pay them adequately for the time or for all the bookings they're losing because of the lockdown. On the one hand, you have these small and individual agencies and linguists suffering. On the other hand, you have this craziness of the stock market and now even deal making restarting again. I mean, if you're looking at company share prices, RWS is trading just a fraction, like 5% below an all-time high. Keywords is just a fraction below an all-time high. Appen is at an all-time high. It's just an interesting. Those fortunes diverge. I mean, the situation is quite tricky, and also in California, for example, there's this law that we had that's really putting a lot of pressure on freelancers. The AB5, which is now with a weird amendment that only excludes certified translators, is passing through. It passed through the Assembly, and now it's in front of the Senate. So if this actually passes the Senate, that's another big issue for freelancers in the state of California, of which there are many. So it's quite an odd situation where all the big business or big business continues to do quite well and trade at record highs and does these mergers and acquisition deals and gets funded, etc. While on the other side of the coin, you have freelance linguists in certain areas really suffering. So I hope things are obviously going back to a more kind of equitable situation in the next few months when things ease. So so that's that. Yeah, so go check out that latest article. Again, exclusive footage we have from that demonstration in front of the Parliament, and then all this the other coverage we did this week. And make sure to register for SlatorCon remote. Still time. All right, have a good one.
Thanks. See you soon.
Thanks, Esther. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.